Welcome to the Everything Cancer Podcast. This podcast is intended for survivors, those who love them, healthcare providers, and leaders of cancer support organizations. Our guests offer insight into the honest survivor experience, how challenges are met head-on, and where blessings are discovered. We cover effective self-advocacy on the bumpy road of cancer survivorship from the moment of diagnosis on. We talk about rekindling intimacy when cancer has changed your world. We are given behind the scenes insight into cancer care because understanding it better empowers you to advocate for yourself more effectively. We hear from leaders of cancer support organizations about their resources and how to access them or those like them. The Everything Cancer Podcast welcomes survivors who would like to share their journey and how they have met their challenges, providers who would like to share their empowering insight, and leaders of cancer support organizations who would like to share their stories and resources. We welcome support through sponsors, the Everything Cancer website, and our Patreon page. Please note, the information shared on the Everything Cancer Podcast is not intended as medical advice. Please always consult with your healthcare team. The staff at Everything Cancer Podcast will not answer individual healthcare concern questions. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy this episode and find it useful. Please do share it with other people if you think they'll benefit from it, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks and take care. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Everything Cancer Podcast. We're thrilled to have you here today, and we have a special treat. Today we have Mr. Mike Herman. I'm going to let him introduce himself and explain what he does and why he's here with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to meet Mr. Herman, and I'm sure it's going to be a pleasure for you too. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Jill. I do want to start off by saying how honored I am to have been chosen for this podcast. It's so important for us to get our messages out to, everybody with cancer. And NCI, National Cancer Institute, recently released a statistic saying over 40% of Americans will get cancer in their lifetimes. But even worse than that, every one of us will be affected by cancer in our lifetime, many, many times over. I had mentioned to you that we went out to dinner the other day with another couple. All four of us had cancer. My wife and the other two all had cancer, and it's scary, right? Cancer is a scary thing, and I, have been going through this for over a decade now, which is fantastic because life expectancy data at the time gave me 4 years. And here I am over 10 years later. I feel wonderful. I'm achy and stuff, but some people say it might be because I'm getting older, which I don't want to believe. But
I wouldn't believe it either.
No, exactly. So that's what drove me to this, right? I'm just still being here. Especially the newer medications that I've been on, immunotherapy and 2 clinical trials have been absurdly good for me. And what I realize is everybody's not as fortunate as I am. The real lucky thing for me is my wife is an RN, and she actually started and headed clinical trials program for about 25 years.
Wow.
Cardiac clinical trials at the Behemoth Hospital in the area. So that's what I call an unfair advantage, right? I don't know how I would have done this or gotten through it without her support there. So the goal, if I had to pick an overarching goal of our organization, it's to give everyone that unfair advantage. And that's, the responses I get or when I speak are just what really continue to
So tell us about your organization, Mike.
So our company is called Speaking on Cancer Patient Advocacy. And we do speaking engagements with groups. We started out with pharmaceutical companies, right? Specifically with Janssen's, now J&J, after a clinical trial of theirs I was on. And it was, to say a miraculous response would be an absolute understatement. And I got to go there and speak with them about, it was the patient's point of view, but more importantly for me was sharing that these people are my hero, right? Not using the word hero lightly. I think we all have our own definitions, but everybody agrees that a hero is someone who saves someone's life. And that's what these people did, right? The whole team there was responsible for saving my life. So after the talk, I get so many accolades, people coming up to me. It was wonderful. It was great, blah, 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 blah. And we really appreciate you doing this. We hope maybe you could find time to do it again. And my answer is, you think this is good for them? I says, imagine getting to stand up there and thank hundreds of people who are responsible for saving your life. I said, as good as you think it was for your folks, it was even more impactful for me. So that's how it started. Share information about how to be your own best self-advocate and the benefits of that, how to advocate for others. One of the biggest responses we get positive on is how to work with people in your organization who have cancer, how to support them and how to talk with them. One of the things that drove that piece of it was I was doing a talk with a very good friend of mine. His name is Scott Weintraub, and he was in the pharmaceutical industry. We were talking about the how do you talk to your friend with cancer. And I was doing most of the talking. He was kind of like an advisor for me. And he says, "Hey, Mike, can I answer this question?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he starts talking about how devastated he was when he heard, we've known each other since high school, when he heard that I had cancer, especially this incurable one, but didn't know how to talk to me, right? And he said, and I didn't even know this until that talk. He says, I didn't know if I should bring it up every time we talk, or if that's going to depress you and make you feel like I got other things in my life besides cancer, or if I should just not bring it up, right? But then maybe you're going to think, I thought Scott was a great friend, and he doesn't even call me on this. And so he said, I didn't know what to do. And if you remember, for the first couple of weeks, I didn't do anything after the first call. And he said, and then I remember calling you and saying, Mike, I have this dilemma, and I don't know what to do. And we talked about it, and should he bring it up that I have cancer? Should he not? And we came up with an agreement that I totally forgot about. That was, he could call me whenever, or I'd call him. And if I want to talk about cancer, I'll bring it up. And if I don't, it just doesn't get mentioned. And it was such a simple, easy solution to dealing with people with cancer, right? So we don't know, right? Unfortunately, I am one with cancer, but if I'm talking to someone with cancer, I don't understand it. I don't know how to deal with them. It's, cancer is, almost synonymous with murder, right? This disease is going to kill me in the past, but it's so different now. So
yes, it is very different now.
Bring that to people, and the new technologies and science fiction like drugs they come out with are absolutely amazing.
I love the approach of having a collaborative conversation about how should we talk about this? How should we bring it up? I think that's great. And then that way you're both laying your cards on the table and deciding how to move forward from there.
Exactly. And it could have been it could have stressed the relationship one way or another,
right?
Possibly, if he hadn't done. I don't think it would have. We've known each other for decades and decades, but it's always right. You get cancer. It's the most overwhelming thing. And then you, Jill, my good friend, you don't even call me, right? Maybe you're not really my good friend, So
and meanwhile, they're terrified to call you.
That we're picking up here,
right? So, Mike, you mentioned that you have had, I think it's multiple myeloma, right?
Correct.
You've been diagnosed with that for 10 years. You described it as incurable. Tell us about your outlook of dealing with the journey that you've been on for 10 years.
I went in for blood work. So I went back to for blood work probably 4 times, my GP says, I want you to see our hematologist. And so we go up to see her. And after all of this, her response was, it's just a B12 deficiency. You don't have cancer. And my wife, who is probably all of 5'2", 120 pounds, looks at her and says, no. And she was taken back because she's not used to being talked to that way. Not nasty or anything, but
right.
No. And she says, what do you know? That's not a B12 deficiency. It doesn't happen. You don't fracture many ribs because you have a B12 deficiency. It is. That's all. I want you to go home. We'll meet again in a couple months and take B12. No, we're not leaving with that diagnosis. Finally, I think in an effort to get rid of my wife and I, she says, go down and get a bone survey then. And a bone survey is nothing more than x-rays from head to toe. You just stand there. It's maybe, 20, 30 x-rays they take. Real simple. So I don't remember, a week or 2 later, I'm at work down outside of D.C., about 80 miles from where my wife is, and I get an email from them saying, check your portal. There's some results there. Check your portal is a message for you there. First thing that went through my mind is this is so awesome, because there's no way they would tell me through an email or a message that I had cancer. I opened it up and I read it and read it and read it and read it because I knew I was missing something. There was no doubt in my mind. I wanted to figure it out. Finally, I couldn't, and I called my wife up and I read it to her. And she hesitated 1 second before responding. And at that point, I knew I had cancer. And I remember driving up to be with her afterwards. And she says to me, there's 2 highways I could take home. She goes, did you take 301 or 95 up here? And I said, I don't remember. I'm here safe and everything, but it was a blank. I just don't remember. And it was very, very odd. So it was not a great start, right? I don't have to explain all the stuff that happened after that with them. But the lack of keeping the patient at the forefront.
Empathy.
She started
lack
talking
of
about
empathy.
bone marrow biopsies, right? Which, happened with my cancer. That's how they diagnose and see the progression. I've probably had 20 of them in my lifetime. And she starts out by saying, it's going to feel like someone hit you in the back with a baseball bat. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, super. And we're talking, and it comes up again. And she says, yeah, it's going to be like, you got hit in the back by a car. And, I'm thinking, I get it. So as the conversation is ending and they're talking about the biopsy, she says, I just want to prepare you. It's going to be, and I said, stop. And that's not like me. I said, it's bad. I absolutely understand it's bad. I'm afraid I'm going to get hit by a train or something if you keep going. The worst part about that was that it almost would steer me away from that, right? I'll just go to an easy doctor that won't do that stuff.
Right.
But it was also bad in that they just didn't understand the patient point of view.
Right.
And what's really bad about it is they suck. They're not great. They're very uncomfortable, but it's not the worst thing in the world, you know? And boy, going into that, I could tell you I was scared out of my mind. If it wasn't,
I'm sure.
If it wasn't for my wife, my best friend, my advocate, I don't know that I would have gone through it after hearing that from them. Arkansas that's where we felt the best doctor in the country was.
Yes.
A guy named Dr. Bart Barlogi. I probably saw him 10 times in my 9 months down there, and there was maybe once or twice he didn't make some tweak to my medicine. So it was truly in my mind, the first time I ever saw personalized medicine. In fact, there was a new drug approved, an immunotherapy. It was called daratumumab. And
yes, I remember that. I remember when it came out.
I want you to go on this. It's the first drug that in I guess 5 years, 6 years at the time, I don't remember, that got me into a sustained remission. Never happened before that. Wonderful. As myeloma does, it mutates, it comes back, and it did. And we had been on virtually every myeloma medication out there. The few that we weren't, the doctors didn't think were a good fit for me for whatever reasons. And we decided to go on to some clinical trials. And they were both at Penn. Mm-hmm. And we talked to a lot of people. I went on to a clinical trial for a drug called teclistamab. And it's what's called a bispecific antibody. Mm-hmm. And what's funny about it is when I explain that to people what it is, and I try and show it with my hand gestures and all, there's no doubt in my mind they're looking at me saying, this guy watches too much late-night sci-fi, because it is. It's just, they make this molecule, and it's got two arms on it, and one connects to the T cell, and one connects to the protein on a cancer cell, the protein that hides it, brings them together, kills it. And I was 18 months undetectable on that drug.
Wow. And
even more amazing is I'm told I have the world's best response to it. At the time, there were two arms to the study. One was through my IV, and one was a sub-Q shot into my stomach. I was chosen for sub-Q. So I remember getting a shot and them saying, it's sub-Q, it works a little bit slower, but we think in 3 to 4 days we'll start seeing some results. Fantastic. 4 hours later, I'm in pain. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And you're hospitalized in the beginning of most studies, I believe. My wife is telling me most of this because I was in such pain I don't remember. I'm kneeling on the bed. I am not one to curse that much. And she's like, right. You are cursing like a drunken sailor. And I was like, I was? And she says, yeah. So the phone rings a little less than 48 hours after the first shot. And I'm still kneeling on the bed in pain and just, my wife's talking about, and then she puts it up to my ear. And I remember thinking, what is the matter with you? I'm in the worst pain ever here. And I didn't say anything, which is part of the reason I'm still alive today. But I didn't say anything to her, but she said, you don't have to do anything, just listen. So she puts the phone up to my ear, and it was my study doctor, Adam Cohen. And he says, hey, Mike, I know you're in a lot of pain now, but I wanted to give you some results. And still in my mind, I'm thinking, why can't we do this tomorrow or the next day? He goes, sorry, in 48 hours, 2 days after the injection, 2 days, my cancer was down by over 99%.
Oh my gosh, but that's why you were in so much pain, because the level was happening in your bones and your marrow.
It goes towards, even today, doctors understanding the patient, right? So if someone had said to me, when cancer is killed, this is what happens. The T cells, they release these cytokines and to kill them, and you have all the cancer and all the cytokines, and Mike, the worse you feel, the better it is. It wouldn't have been any less painful, but psychologically, I would have been sitting there saying, I know I can take this for another hour, just one more hour. And I remember looking at my wife saying, I don't think I could do this again. And it was her that educated me and said, it was so bad because it killed so much so quickly. Right. There's no cytokine release when there's no cancer in there. Right. When it's just... So from that day on, I never had a response for the entire 18, 19, 20 months I was on it. And as my cancer does, it mutated and came back. And I went on another bispecific antibody, something called surpass from Genentech. 2 weeks after the first dose, my cancer was undetectable.
Wow.
And what's really neat about the study, although it scared the bejeebers out of me when I was told about it, is it ended after a year because they wanted to check how durable it is. And I'm, in my little mind, I'm thinking, just keep giving me drugs. They're working. Don't stop them. I don't want to chance anything. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I had my 7-month checkup. For the first time in over a decade, no treatments at all, and my cancer is still undetectable.
Wow.
So
I'm so glad to hear that.
It's so important to get the message that things are different today out to there. It's not, in the past, there were 3 things you did if you had cancer. You were sleeping, you were at chemo, or you were kneeling over the toilet getting sick.
You're right. And it's changed so much, thankfully. Yeah. And I think a lot of people still have that past view of it, and it's so different now. 2 things, Mike. First is there's a real paradigm shift going on in cancer care right now, where it used to be the focus was on the cure, and that isn't necessarily the focus. The focus is now looking at it as keeping cancer under control so that you can live your life.
Right. So, again, I hate that my cancer is incurable, right?
Right.
And actually, it's incurable so far, right? So it hasn't been cured yet, I tell people, because I know it's going to be. But when you look at how the whole shift in how we look at things and how we treat patients being differently, it's true, because in the past we had silos. Even today, and everybody's enemies. There is the pharmaceutical company, there's the pharmacy benefit managers, there's the doctors, there's the hospital, and everything is everyone else's fault, right? Right? It's because that prices are high because of them, not us. And so, and in fact, when I started reaching out to folks, someone had said to me, "Isn't the pharmaceutical industry who you're fighting against?" And my response was, I'm not fighting against anybody. I'm trying to bring people together, because that's the only way. Getting all of the stakeholders at the table is the only way you're going to fix the system and break down these silos and try to understand better about, kind of to your point. So for me, the cure is kind of a big thing if it comes about, but mine is considered a chronic condition now, right? Thousands of people in the U.S. still die every year from it, but it's a chronic condition. Here I am 10 and a half years later, and I feel great.
I'm glad you're feeling great. And I love seeing the advertisements on television now for medication for metastatic breast cancer and metastatic lung cancer. That person can now keep it under control, go to work, engage with their kids, engage with their grandchildren. And so it's a step away from going towards a cure and more keeping it under control and living your life.
Yeah, and you had made a comment
engaging
before,
in life.
It's really about, it's always about treating the cancer, right? Nothing would obviously make me happier than if it was cured.
Right.
But it's about treating the whole person, right?
Right. I
mean, I've shared stories with you in the past about just how, and you've even shared with me, the psychological, that's not us. The intimacy, that's not us. That's our job is to make drugs to make you live longer, right? And it's really starting to change now. It really is.
Thank you for tuning into the Everything Cancer podcast. We appreciate you being here with us. If you are finding this episode useful, please share it with others that you think would benefit. And don't forget to rate us with your favorite podcast platform. Please check out the show notes for more information and more information about our guests, links to their websites, and any other resources they've shared. We aim to make it easy for you to connect and learn more about the valuable insights shared in each episode. We welcome support through sponsors, the Everything Cancer website, and our Patreon page. Please stay tuned for a brief word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to our episode. Thank you so much. Do you have a dry mouth that distracts you with that nasty feeling and taste? H2 Ocean has your solution, literally and figuratively, with its sea salt healing rinse. It's made from salt from the Red Sea, and it has other minerals that are beneficial to you in it. It also has lysozyme enzyme, which is soothing to the inside of your mouth, and xylitol, which makes your mouth water. It's very mild in flavor, yet refreshing. Does not make you suck in your cheeks like often happens with other mouthwashes. And it stays with you. Other mouthwashes, they're gone in 10 or 15 minutes. This has stayed with me for a few hours now, and it's great. I plan on using it before every podcast episode to keep my mouth moist without taking distracting sips of tea and so on while I'm talking. The links to the H2 Ocean sea salt healing rinse will be in the show notes, and then a QR code also on the YouTube version of this podcast. It's excellent to help rinsing with chemo mouth or irritation in your mouth from radiation, but mouth sores and just general everyday use. I find it really pleasant and really helpful to use. I hope you do too. Thanks. Looking at the whole person, which is so important. It's so important. The second piece I wanted to bring up that you touched upon, you're very involved in getting the message out there, is the importance of clinical trials and the importance of discussing access to clinical trials and if they're right or not for you with your doctor. So can you, from your perspective, Mike, your professional perspective and your patient perspective, can you enlighten our listeners on clinical trials?
Right. So, I just shared these stories about these two miraculous responses I've had, especially when chemo really didn't do anything for me for 5 or 6 years. But what I can tell you is, although they might not be for everybody, every single person that's unfortunate enough to get cancer should talk about it, clinical trials with their doctor from day one, right? The doctor may say, hey, there's nothing that's available for new people, or this isn't going to work because of that, we don't think. But you need to do that. And when you don't get the right answer, you need to reach out to another doctor. I remember one lady saying, I know my doctor isn't the greatest. I've been going to him for so long, and I know it would kill him if I left him and went to somebody else. And my response to that was, I could promise you one thing. Nobody was ever on their deathbed early saying, at least I didn't hurt my doctor's feelings. And, any doctor, especially a good doctor and a friend, should encourage second opinions, as I do. I've had, oh my God, I second, third, fourth, fifth opinion. I've probably had 8 different ones in my 10-year journey. And everyone, I didn't necessarily switch to them. Every one of them gave me different points of view, different understanding, and the ability to look at things for myself. So, from a personal point of view, you can imagine from what I said, my feeling about clinical trials. And they come up with these new technologies, bispecifics, trispecifics, they're coming out, antibodies now, CAR T-cell therapy. And now, because there was a problem with being able to produce, right, T-cells, they take cells out of your body, they re-engineer them, and they put them back in, and a positive is it's your own cells and such. So theoretically, they'll live, or at least live a lot longer than a typical therapy. But the problem was the manufacturing. Once you take it out of the body, months and months behind. Some people don't have that much time, obviously.
Right.
And so now they're working on, I don't know if it's in clinical trials yet, it might be, but and what they call an off-the-shelf T-cell therapy.
Oh, wow.
And what's neat about it, like the bispecific antibody that was off the shelf, is if they decide to do it, and this turns out to be a good methodology, it's just another huge step forward in treating patients.
So for our listeners who, I think oftentimes clinical trials are a mystery to us, can you describe what the different phases of clinical trials are?
Sure.
And what they mean?
So So there's a couple different ways to look at that. The first is from the pharmaceutical point of view, right? So there's phase 1 clinical trials, which are really out there to look at safety, right? If I give Mike this drug, what kind of bad reactions will it have? That's the smallest group. Then it goes up to number 2, where they try and figure out, can they increase the dose?
Yeah.
Right. And up to what point can they do that? And then phase 3 is where they're kind of implementing everything they've learned, and is what most people know is the final phase of a clinical trial. But there's also a phase 4 where they do some investigation after the fact, which is really good. I think there's not been enough follow up on that. So from the pharmaceutical clinical operations point of view, that's how it works. From my point of view, and obviously things change a little on each one, but in general, once they decide, or you decide with your care team that you're going to do it, they do a pretty good job of educating you on what it is and what the trial is going to look like. They don't do, as I mentioned before, a great job of looking at my point of view and such. So I went into both clinical trials. Both of them, I was hospitalized. One was for 10 days. One was 4 days, 1 week, 4 days the next week while they tried it out. And that's fairly typical on clinical trials, right? Especially in the early stages where they're not positive of what the reactions could be like. Although they've done it before, the reactions are different for everybody. I wish they weren't. I wish everybody could go on to a clinical trial and have the results I did. But the reality is they're different for everybody. So first thing I do is I go into the hospital, and they do blood work and all of this other neat stuff. And the doctors, 82 doctors are in there talking with you. And, then they say, okay, tomorrow we're giving you the first dose. Do you have any questions? Well, it's kind of a crazy thing. It's like a brain surgeon saying to you, hey, here's what I do. Do you have any questions about the procedures I use when I operate? Of course not. You're a brain surgeon. I'm a person. That piece needs to be fixed a bit, the communications piece. And I know people at so many pharmaceuticals, Sanofi, Janssen & Janssen, Genentech, who are really working on, they're definitely doing better, but even like never good enough, right? What I've asked the 2 pharmaceuticals that I was on their clinical trials was, why me, and why do most people have much less of a response to this? And aren't there studies that can be done, right? Why aren't you calling me up saying, we want to do genetic testing on you. We want to do more of this. We want to look and figure. In a second, I would have said, absolutely. And I got answers, and these were not from their advocate folks, but I got answers that, again, were like I was talking about the brain surgeon. They answered it, and they're done. They said, does that answer your question? And I'm like, what was my question after what you said? I don't even remember. So, right. So it was, and then it's done, right? So first clinical, they all work differently. The first clinical trial I was on, you stay on a drug until it's either approved or it stops working. And there's laws out there. So let's say it was working for me, but for some reason it didn't get approved. Janssen's would still, for as long as I needed it, provide that drug to me.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, which is a really good feeling, right? Yeah. So here I am, 18 months, actually more than 18 months. I was in 18 months in complete remission, but a little more than 18 months. And it was just a bit overwhelming in a good way experience, the whole clinical trials operation. And after the first one, instead of being nervous or anxious or anything like that, I was like, another one, great. Just, I'm ready for it. Bring it on. Same kind of stuff in the beginning because it worked so effectively. But this time I knew that the pain was good, right? It was two
Right.
things. It was good and it was temporary.
Right.
But the results were hopefully a lot longer term. And on this clinical trial, it was unique. The second one was unique in that it ended after a year because they want to test the durability. And for me, 7 months afterwards, my cancer is still undetectable. First time in over a decade, I haven't been on cancer treatment. So you can imagine what a fan I am of clinical trials. And like I said, clinical trials don't work the same for everybody. They're not the right thing. They're not always the answer for cancers, especially some rare cancers where they just don't have any trials out. But you just always have to talk about them and consider them in every decision you make.
Yes. So I have 4 quick points to make.
Okay.
Second opinions for our listeners, third, fourth, but particularly second opinions are so important. And if your doctor tries to talk you out of getting one, you need to find another doctor, because that second opinion will increase your confidence in your current treatment if they agree with it. They may have additional insight into your current treatment that will help your current oncologist. They can send your treatment plan to your current oncologist. The cancerresearchinstitute.org,
yes.
Which is an amazing organization, lists clinical trials. You can go on there to find clinical trials, but they recommend that you find an NCI designated cancer center to get your second opinion at. And Mike is agreeing with me.
Yes. It's
right.
So, I'm very fortunate in many ways. But where I'm located, I am within 2.5 hours of 10 of the top 50 NCI designated cancer
That's
centers.
Great.
And,
so you
don't out in the middle of the country in a rural area, you don't have that. You don't have that
right.
option. And,
right. So the other thing the Cancer Research Institute suggests is, if it's untenable for you to make it to an NCI designated cancer center, is to find an oncologist that specializes in your type of cancer for several years and has expertise in it. And you can work with your insurance company to find someone that is in network to go for that second opinion. And all health insurance companies support second opinions. It leads to better treatment. The other point I wanted to bring up is there are clinical trials not only for treatment of cancer, but for symptom management. So open your ears, open your eyes, listen, read about them, and find what can help you on your journey. There are also clinical trials for survivorship issues and quality of life issues. So there's a lot being done right now. A lot of them are looking at lifestyle medicine, lifestyle changes such as exercise and diet. And you are helping, if you happen to join in these clinical trials, you're helping other people through the data that's being collected to do better on their journey. And if you benefit from it, which hopefully we do, that would be great. How clinical trials work from an health insurance perspective is that standard of care would be covered by your insurance company. The clinical trial pieces where CT scans are being done, particularly, or blood work, particularly related to the clinical trial, the doctor's visits, particularly related to the clinical trial, and the clinical trial pharmaceuticals or radiation treatment or whatever, that will be covered by the company that is sponsoring the clinical trial. So oftentimes it's a coordinated effort between your provider, the clinical trial coordinator, and your insurance company. And again, your insurance company they're there to pick up the standard of care, and the clinical trial coordinator will then make sure everything else goes towards the clinical trial company. So it's really imperative that you get to know your clinical trial coordinator well and work with them. And they're fantastic, knowledgeable, helpful people. And Mike is there nodding as I'm saying this. So that's so important. But again, Cancer Research Institute is a great organization that is full of great information about advocating for yourself and about access to clinical trials. I have absolutely fallen in love with the information on that site. And American Cancer Society is always a go-to for information as a survivor or someone on the journey, and anything dealing with quality of life issues on the cancer journey. American Cancer Society is fantastic. There's a lot of great organizations out there. Mike, I'm sure you're very familiar with Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
A big one for me.
Yeah, they're great. They're fantastic. So Mike, another point we were going to, so thank you for that. another point we were going to talk about is how important shared decision making is with your doctor. And second opinions kind of segue into that a little bit, but you talked about when we initially were speaking prior to our interview, how important that communication is.
So, I'll go back to a quick story I told you years ago when my great-grandparents were alive. If I ever went up to them and said, the doctor said this, but I don't think he's right. I'm going to go to another doctor and find out. Their response would have been something to the effect of, so you think you're smarter than the doctor now? And doctors were like these all-powerful people that knew everything, right? And they don't, right? And there's so many, and they can't, right? They're focusing on, probably the most critical piece, and that's finding a cure for your cancer, but they can't know about everything. And allowing your doctor to make all the decisions for you is assuming that your doctor knows absolutely everything about you, and they don't, right? They just don't have the time. Sometimes it takes weeks, if not months, to get in to see a specialty doctor. So being willing to ask questions, interject your thoughts, say, what about, hey, what about clinical trials? Well, we don't think there's any that are good for you right now. Well, and you need to learn to push a little bit. Well, what ones are out there, and why don't you think they'd work for me? And how will standard of treatment, if you will, how will that affect me? Doctors sometimes don't have your perspective. They don't have your point of view. And it is so critical, right? I talk to people, who's responsible for your health? My oncologist. No, that's not true. My general practitioner is. None of it's true. You're responsible, right?
Yes.
I could go to the best hospital with the best doctors and the best treatment. It doesn't matter if I don't do it, or if I don't listen, or if I don't adhere to what I'm supposed to do as part of taking that drug or the clinical trial or whatever. So people need to understand they're the ones that are responsible for their health
right
care.
But they're also responsible for communicating while they're doing that as to what is happening and also what is important to them. So if they stop taking something because it's interfering with, say, going to work, they need to let their doctor know before they decide to stop taking something. I'm finding I'm not able to make it to work while I'm taking this medication. And then have a conversation with the doctor. Why is that? Well, I'm having diarrhea 3 times a day. Okay, well, then we need to work with you on controlling that diarrhea. I understand why you don't want to go. I wouldn't want to go to work either with diarrhea 3 times a day. The doctor's thinking to themselves, I'm sure. So that would interrupt your day terribly. So that give and take is so important. And that communication. And also, don't wait till your next appointment. Call or message through your electronic chart what is going on with you. And Mike, here's my book. It's Cancer Journey Guide and Journals, Empowerment in Diagnosis, Treatment, and Beyond. Documenting your symptoms, writing down your symptoms is so important, because then you're talking with your doctor about real data that's happening with you, and it gives them something to act on and work effectively with you.
Yeah.
You can do it in a notebook. You can do it in your phone. You can do it in one of those composition books. There you go, that you can buy at Walmart for $1 or $1.25 now. This just has organized journals for that. But writing your symptoms down when they occur, and then being able to communicate them to your doctor, or what's important to you, or what is going off the rails for you. That collaborative give and take conversation is you advocating for yourself, but also you taking responsibility for your health care.
You're absolutely right. And one of the really important things you hit on is being prepared for your meetings, right? So I use a note thing on my phone because I don't think of everything all at once.
Right.
And, as you can imagine, with someone that's been on cancer treatment for over a decade, I forget things. So
Yeah.
I have a note app, and one of them will say, whoever my doctor is, Dr. Cohen, and it'll be questions. Why this? How about? Because I think of them throughout the time period, and I can tell you when I get there, if I didn't do that, because in the beginning I didn't, I'd be like, I know there's things I wanted to ask you, I just can't remember.
Right.
And this is a good way of keeping track of that.
Yes.
And keep track of the answers and what you
Yes.
hear. And these new medical record systems, these new portals you could go in and get your information are fantastic, right?
Yes.
Because they even show you trends and stuff, which being a big business guy before I got sick, I love seeing. But one thing I did not do that I wish I did was keep better notes about things.
Mike, one of the things that we talked about is how you want to help other people. And to that end, you are currently formatting a book, correct?
Yeah, so that's one of the new initiatives we're looking at. So we're pulling together some information on the book. It's going to be something similar to the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books. I don't know if I don't understand the business, so I don't know if I could use a title, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, for cancer patients. But the subcategory or subtitle of the book is going to be So What? Right? You need to learn.
I like that.
You need to figure out what's really important and what's not important, right?
Right.
Did you know how to deal with cancer when you first got? No. Well, imagine your friends and loved ones, and you get cancer. They don't know what to say or how to talk to you or how to treat you and all. I said, just think about their intent, right? If someone came up to me and said, Mike, you ugly son of a whatever, but you look okay, well, I might be offended a little by that. But if someone comes up to me and says, hey, you look really good, what they really meant was, hey, you look really good.
And they're noticing you. They see you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really meant to be an uplifting kind of, here's what's important. And, everybody has to decide what's important to them. Right? So, for example, I stopped saying the pharmaceutical companies have given me an extra 6 years. 3 months before I was diagnosed, our first granddaughter, Kinley, was born. Our whole adult lives. That's what I wanted, kids. Grandkids, right? The only reason you have kids is to get to the grandkids.
Right.
I say that jokingly. We have wonderful relationships. Now, here, and it's crazy you think about the thoughts in your mind. The thing that went through my mind most when I found out she was being born was, I can't wait to stand at the kindergarten bus stop with my finger out and her holding my finger and waiting for the bus. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't even get to do that. I don't even get to see her go to kindergarten. This is unfair. This is the most unfair thing in the world. I'm a good person, and it shouldn't happen to me. And, it takes you saying, you're right, life isn't fair. And it took me a little while to get to that. When I was diagnosed, and I suspect it's that way for a majority of cancer patients, one thing goes through your mind, and that is, oh my God, I'm going to die, right? And it's a horrible feeling, especially later on when you find out that you have a life expectancy of 4 years.
Right.
It's just those two words. Everybody has it. Those two words, when you become a cancer patient, are probably two of the most horrible words you'll ever hear, life expectancy. But that's the way it is. And once you get to the point where you say, life isn't fair, you're absolutely right, Mike. And, you alone can't make it fairer, but you can respond. So you could either, lay there and slowly pass away and be mad your whole rest of your life, or you could try and take control and do something about it. And in the past, people thought, I can't do that alone, I have to hire someone. You can. And we do talks at corporations all the time and many other places. And that's exactly what we talk about is you can make a difference. You can understand. And there's so much information out there that puts it in a language that the average guy, as I call myself, right? Not a doctor or researcher or anything, that an average guy can understand. And understanding the basics of cancer, how it works, and what treatments options are and are like, really helps you. So if you came up to me, if I met you and God forbid you had cancer and I never had it before, and you said, Mike, I feel so fortunate. In my mind, I would be looking at you saying, she is so full of what.
Yeah.
Because it's just, but the reality is once you realize, hey, I've got cancer, there's not that there's nothing I could do about it, but I have cancer, right? I have to work towards doing that. You start realizing that you can do so much for yourself. And even from a caregiver's perspective, you could do so much to help other people. You don't have to be an expert. It's best if you understand. And there are places out there, there are people out there. You go for information. We have a website that I'll shamelessly plug, but it's not a paid website.
No, it's fine.
So it's, the company is speaking on cancer patient advocacy, and the website is www.socpanow.com.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so what's really neat about it is, and one of the most popular pieces is, if you go to the website and click on the tab up top that says cancer types, we now have about 20, I think exactly 20 of the most common cancers, and you click on it, right? For me, it was multiple myeloma. It could be breast cancer. It could be any of them. You click on it, and in every category, the first link listed is, here's what the NCI says about this. The next link is, here's what the American Cancer Society says. And then below that, there's 5 to 10 support links, right? Here's organizations that you can go to if you need financial help, if you need travel assistance, if you need to understand what's happening, if you just need to talk to somebody. I'm a wreck, I think I'm going to die. Well, call these folks up that are specialists in these areas and talk with them, and they can help you understand things a little bit better.
Mike, can you give me the name of that website one more time?
Sure. It's SOCPA now.com. Speaking on cancerpatientadvocacy.com, now.com. And like I said, it's an absolutely free resource. The information in there is current because of the way we designed the website, where everything's a link. I never have to worry about. That's perfect. NCI put out these new statistics or guidelines or whatever. I'd have to have 4 people working full time to keep all of this stuff for all the cancers.
Well, thank you for doing that, because you're giving people a one-stop shop basically to go to find all these credible sources of information,
credible,
that can really help them. And I know from being on them, they're very helpful. And I so appreciate what you're doing. And I like how you talk about how being diagnosed creates a paradigm shift, which is why you're doing the book of inspirational quotes. It creates a paradigm shift in how you think about things. Don't sweat the small stuff.
So if I could, again, to your audience here, if anybody has come across any inspirational quotes, if they could either go to my website, you could contact me through there, or go through Jill. And if you want your name attached to it in the resources, I'd love to do that. Some people don't like that and they just want it to be anonymous. That's okay, because like everything else with cancer, it's about you and what's important to you.
And what's important, and what has helped you get through your journey, what has helped give you strength. And that's what you're looking for. Right. So I'm going to also include Mike's LinkedIn contact information on the show notes, so you can send him a message through that. You'll be able to send him a message through his website. And if you have a thought that keeps you going, share it with him and he'll give you credit in his book. And I think this book will make a lot of impact for people. Mike, I so appreciate your time here with us today. Are there any thoughts that you would like to share that we've not gone over yet?
Yeah, a million of them, right? It's just, what's this, a 48 hours?
We'll have you back. How's that sound? We'll have you back. And
to me,
we can go
the
through.
most important thing is you're responsible for you, right?
You're responsible
Ultimately,
for
it's
you. I love
that's
that.
responsible. Some people take I know this one guy who's got a cancer. I see him. I used to see him when I got treated locally every now and then. Super intelligent guy, doing super well. And I said, "Hey, Mert, what are you getting for your cancer?" And his response was, "Don't know, don't care. As long as it's working, I let them do what they want to do." And it works for him, right? But it's in my opinion, not really the best approach, because
Right.
things don't always work that great for everybody. Some,
Right.
like he was lucky way back then with standard treatments that they were doing so good for him. So you just look out for yourself, take care of yourself. You're, like they say, you're number one, and you need to act that way. And boy, the more support you could get, whether it's family, friends,
Organizations,
whatever. But that said, you got to be careful about the information that you accept.
Right.
Friends, family like that, never, ever want to give you bad information. But it's their view of things, right?
Right.
And you'd never want to alter your cancer journey, if you will, based on what someone not educated specifically about that says to you. So, just look out for yourself. If you do need to reach me and you want to get me directly, my email is mikeh@socpanow.com.
Okay. We'll include that too.
Thank you. And even if you have general questions, if you have thoughts, most importantly, if you have ideas, hey, Mike, this would be good for your site, or, hey, have you talked about this, or do you look at anything? You can ask me anything you want, and worst thing that'll happen is I'll say, I don't know, let me get back to you on that.
Or talk with your doctor.
Or, talk with your doctor, or, hey, here's some folks you might want to talk to about that, because it's just not my area of expertise. And it's almost like the friend stuff, right? So I do know a lot more than I ever hoped to know about cancer and the healthcare system, but I'm not an expert in all these areas, right?
Right.
So if you want general information like we talked about here, I'm the guy, right? If you have specific information, like I cannot answer personal questions.
Right.
I have this cancer, what should I do? First of all, the liability is great, but second of all, I don't know.
Right.
Right. I even with my cancer, right? I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been on 1,000 different drugs. I know what worked for me, what didn't work for me. But I'm different than you, right?
Right.
Even
Which
if
is
I
why
look
we
like
need to have,
even if it's another old white man, right? Even though we look the same, we're different, and our biology is different. And that's why it's important. The last message is clinical trials. Always consider them. Please always make them a part of your discussion with your doctor. If they blow it off, you push. You have to be comfortable doing it. And if they keep blowing it off and they don't want to talk to you about it, or don't like the idea of you getting second opinions, you probably have the wrong doctor.
Yeah, I think so too. Mike, I so appreciate your time with the Everything Cancer podcast. It has been phenomenal having you here today, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you, Jill. I really appreciate you, and like I said, I'm honored. I'm flattered that I was chosen by you. And anyway, anything I could do to help people.
You found me.
Oh no! Well, so that's important. Always reaching out. That's how I got into this. Finding people at pharmaceutical companies that do this, finding doctors that are specialists in this, finding people, right? It's the whole person, including your psychological health and things like that. just making sure you try and connect with everybody that you think can have an effect, and then keep in touch with them, right? I know people on LinkedIn who just want to keep clicking.
Oh, right,
connect. But I don't like when people connect with me and then that's it.
Right.
It's
I agree. It needs to be dynamic. And I am honored that you're here with me today and you chose to spend time here with me and with Everything Cancer. I cannot say that enough.
And what you're doing is phenomenal, getting the word out.
Thank you.
It's one of the things that really is going to help in changing our broken healthcare system.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Everything Cancer podcast. We hope you found the conversation as insightful and as inspiring as we did. Remember, all the details about our guests, including their contact information and links to resources they've shared on their websites, will be included in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting us by visiting our website, checking out our Patreon page, or becoming a sponsor. Your support helps us to continue to bring you these important discussions. Don't forget to subscribe to the Everything Cancer podcast on your favorite platform and follow us on social media. Always remember, the information shared here is not intended as medical advice. For any personal health concerns, please consult with your healthcare team. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back with us again next time. And for anybody that you have invited to join us, please reach out if you would like to be a sponsor. We would welcome you. Thank you.